Everyone figured Victor Wembanyama would simply be the next in a long line of rising superstars content to nod along and praise LeBron James for showing the way. But pause. After LeBron appeared on his Mind the Game podcast and insisted that today's players are far more evolved than the icons of Michael Jordan's generation, Wembanyama finally fired back with a perspective that could fracture the entire basketball universe right down the center. And I promise you won't guess which side Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley ultimately choose. The second I watched that LeBron clip, I knew social media was nanoseconds from a complete meltdown. I'm talking about that Mind the Game asterisk episode where LeBron sat with Tyrese Halliburton and unleashed a claim that countless fans felt effectively rewrote a giant chunk of basketball lore. He seriously argued that grinding through all 82 games in the 80s and 90s was less demanding than now, because the tempo was slower and the offensive spacing wasn't nearly as taxing as the game he faces today.
Because the game is different. Like, I want people to understand and our fans to understand that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2000s.
It genuinely feels like he's trying to reshape the conversation around basketball history on the fly, just to make his own career longevity seem even more extraordinary. But fans weren't buying it for a second because that episode didn't merely spark a debate. It set off a full-blown firestorm. It reportedly became the most disliked upload in the podcast's history, and even many loyal LeBron supporters struggled to defend comments that came across as dismissive. LeBron sat there describing the 1980s game as crowded and slower paced. But listen to this. When you actually look at the numbers from seasons like 1986 and 1987, the pace was noticeably faster than much of what we're seeing around the league today. Teams were sprinting end-to-end every possession as if every trip down the floor mattered, and they were doing it while absorbing far more physical contact with far fewer whistles than players expect now. LeBron argues that modern spacing is more difficult, yet critics argue he overlooks that players from that era flew commercial staying in standard hotels and ground through travel without the luxury resources available today. Meanwhile, modern stars benefit from elite recovery programs, private travel and technology designed to keep their bodies fresh throughout the season. To many observers, it looks like part of a broader effort to explain away the rise of load management across the league. I mean, if people can be convinced that today's game is dramatically more demanding, suddenly sitting out back-to-back games doesn't draw nearly as much criticism. Think about the physical demands of that era for a second, because they were on an entirely different scale. You had legends like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson playing at a relentless pace while wearing shoes that offered nowhere near the comfort and support athletes enjoy today. Your joints would probably be begging for mercy before halftime in equipment like that. And yet there were no cryotherapy chambers, advanced recovery centers, or personalized nutrition teams waiting around every corner. We all remember the reaction from Shaquille O'Neal during that heated discussion we talked about in a previous video involving these same LeBron comments. But hold up, it wasn't only former players who were upset. A lot of younger players reportedly felt the same frustration with the statement. And Wemmy especially wasn't interested in staying quiet, because in his eyes, this wasn't simply a questionable opinion from a veteran star. Many viewed it as an attempt to strengthen LeBron's GOAT argument by making previous generations appear less impressive than they actually were. The whole thing came across as incredibly condescending to the icons who helped shape the style of basketball that modern players rely on every night. The backlash became so intense that the comment section looked more like a battleground than a discussion forum, with fans criticizing what they see as excessive foul hunting in today's game. So if the older era was supposedly easier, plenty of people started asking why LeBron faced so many struggles in key matchups against Houston. At some point, critics argue it becomes difficult to claim the greatest of all-time crown while downplaying the pioneers who laid the foundation for the modern NBA. This podcast controversy ended up being the breaking point for a huge portion of the fan base, and it opened the door for what could become one of the most talked-about clashes of opinions the league has seen in years. Because while LeBron was defending his perspective publicly, Victor Wembanyama was reportedly preparing a response that nobody expected. We all know Wemming usually carries himself as one of the calmest and most thoughtful players in the league, but girl, insiders say seeing legends constantly minimized finally pushed him to speak his mind. Think about how wild that is for a second, because we're talking about a 22-year-old superstar who would seemingly benefit from promoting the modern era. Instead, reports suggest he's become increasingly frustrated with what he views as the softer elements creeping into today's game. The bigger story here is that Wemmy is reportedly tired of flopping, exaggerated contact, and whistle-seeking plays that many fans believe have changed the identity of the NBA. And according to those reports, he's pointing directly at the player many believe helped popularize that style. But here, where things get even more uncomfortable for LeBron, there's a massive irony unfolding right in front of everyone that he probably never expected. Many critics argue that LeBron helped create the blueprint for the dramatic foul drawing tactics we see throughout the league today. But now, players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the younger Oklahoma City core have elevated those tactics to another level. During those recent matchups where the Los Angeles Lakers were overwhelmed by the Thunder, LeBron's frustration was impossible to miss. Shai and the younger stars have become masters at maximizing every favorable whistle, and many believe the strategy is now hurting LeBron at the worst possible moment. In fact, critics point to those losses as part of the reason the Lakers' season came to an abrupt end. We allegedly saw all of it unfold and treated it as the ultimate validation of his concerns, arguing that foul baiting is draining authenticity from the sport. And then listen to this, he reportedly delivered one line that people around the San Antonio Spurs were still talking about weeks afterward. To quote him exactly, he said,
"The so-called king needs to put some respect on the legends."
"When I heard that, I nearly fell out of my chair because you just don't hear rookies or honestly anyone talk about LeBron in that kind of way. And I know what you're thinking. Why would a player born in 2004 care so much about basketball from the 90s? Well, the answer should have the rest of the league paying attention. Because Wemby isn't just a star athlete. He's a true student of basketball history who has studied countless hours of film featuring Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But hold up, it goes even deeper once you understand who helped shape that mindset. You have to factor in Greg Popovich because Pop has spent decades protecting what many consider the purest principles of basketball. We've all heard his famous complaints about how the three-point revolution changed the sport and how elite defense has become harder to find. And according to many around the game, he's helped mold Wemby into the complete counterargument to the style of basketball LeBron often represents. For the last 2 years, Popovich has reportedly emphasized that toughness, discipline, and fundamentals are still the clearest path to greatness. And judging by the way Wembanyama has played in 2026, that message landed loud and clear. You can see it every time he steps on the court because his game isn't built around endlessly chasing threes or trying to play like an oversized guard. Instead, he's dominating through the very skills LeBron suggested are easier: post-play, footwork, physicality, and a mid-range package that looks straight out of another era. While everyone else spreads the floor and searches for favorable whistles, Wemby is battling defenders in the paint and knocking down turnaround jumpers that make fans wonder if Tim Duncan is secretly calling the plays himself. In a way, it almost feels like he's intentionally embracing old-school basketball to challenge the idea that past legends couldn't survive in today's game. The wildest part is that while LeBron is defending his legacy on podcasts, some of the sport's most respected voices seem increasingly eager to embrace Victor as the future. We're talking about the kind of respect and endorsement that only a handful of young players have ever received. It's almost as if the legends heard the criticism of previous generations and collectively decided to rally behind someone who still values that history. And trust me, once you earn the approval of Charles Barkley, you know something unusual is happening. Just this May, Sir Charles went on an unforgettable rant where he practically used Wemby as the perfect rebuttal to the argument that today's game is automatically tougher than the eras that came before it.
And this guy is like 4 inches taller, and he's athletic. It can shoot threes. I mean, it is a beautiful thing to
But
watch.
if you want to see a total plot twist, you have to look at what happened with Shaquille O'Neal. Remember when Shaq seemed like Wemby's biggest critic and kept reducing him to nothing more than a super tall player with great skills? Well, fast forward to 2026 and the entire narrative has flipped on its head with Shaq now calling Victor Wembanyama the first truly complete big man the game has ever seen.
I said this to you and the guy, I think Wemby is the first perfect big man that's ever created.
But Shaq didn't stop at handing out compliments. He actually used Wemby as a direct counterpoint to the arguments LeBron made on that podcast. Shaq emphasized that Victor plays basketball the way dominant big men are supposed to, attacking the paint, embracing contact, and imposing his will instead of spending the entire night drifting around the perimeter. And in Shaq's view, that approach stands in sharp contrast to many modern stars whose games rely more on finesse than physicality. But listen to this. It's not only former players who have been singing Wemby's praises. Back in April, Victor captured the Magic Johnson Award, and Magic Johnson couldn't stop talking about the maturity and basketball intelligence that set him apart from so many players in today's game. You could tell Magic saw something familiar in Victor, a mindset that echoes the dedication and passion that defined earlier generations. It's that same obsession with mastering the game rather than chasing attention or turning every workout into social media content. Even Kevin Garnett, one of the fiercest competitors the sport has ever produced, has spoken about the edge and relentless mentality he sees in Wemby. And when KG starts saying a player should become the global face of the league, many fans hear a much bigger message, that the NBA's next era may already be arriving.
He's changing how we're looking at the post position. Victor is bringing a different level of guard slash, small forward to the big man position.
But having legendary players support you is one thing. Walking onto the court and backing it up against the guy who calls himself the greatest is a completely different challenge. While LeBron is often associated with elite recovery programs and a carefully managed brand, Victor has built a routine that many people compare to the obsessive work ethic of Kobe Bryant. And honestly, the most intimidating thing about Victor Wembanyama isn't his 74 frame or his unbelievable wingspan. It's the fact that he approaches the game with the mindset of an old-school competitor despite being only 22 years old. While many players his age are building social media followings or enjoying the spotlight away from the court, Victor is reportedly spending his free time studying, playing chess, and finding new ways to sharpen his focus. That's the same kind of relentless obsession that made Kobe legendary, where basketball wasn't just part of life, it was the center of it. This isn't the typical modern superstar who treats the NBA like a personal lifestyle brand. Victor has largely stayed away from the celebrity culture that has become a major part of professional sports over the last 2 decades. He doesn't seem interested in the fashion headlines or the Hollywood connections. And that's exactly why so many old-school basketball voices view him as a bridge back to the values they believe defined previous eras. You probably remember the viral clip from earlier this season when Victor became emotional after a big victory. Some people online mocked the moment, but they completely misunderstood what they were watching. Those weren't tears from someone overwhelmed by pressure. They looked more like the emotional release that comes from sacrificing everything for a goal and finally seeing the work pay off. It reminded many fans of the passion and dedication that players like Michael Jordan displayed throughout their careers. That kind of visible emotional investment feels increasingly rare in an era dominated by branding, marketing, and constant online attention. The really fascinating part is how Wemby approaches health and durability. At a time when workload management has become a major topic throughout the league, Victor appears determined to move in the opposite direction. His training, recovery, and injury prevention routines have earned a reputation for being incredibly detailed and demanding. But he's not doing it so he can play less. He's doing it because he wants to stay on the floor as much as possible. Reports have described unusual flexibility work, balance drills, and late-night training sessions designed to help his body handle the demands of a long NBA season. His goal seems clear: build a legacy as an all-time great rather than simply extend a career. And for many fans, that approach feels like a direct challenge to the maintenance culture that has become common around the league. Because if a 74 player can consistently handle a heavy workload, people naturally start questioning why smaller players sometimes need additional rest. But hold up, this is where the story starts getting even more intense. According to advanced tracking discussions surrounding the 2026 season, Victor has earned praise for relying far less on foul-drawing tactics than many other star players. He prefers to play through contact rather than searching for whistles whenever possible. While critics often accuse LeBron of exaggerating contact on certain plays, Victor has developed a reputation for absorbing physical play and immediately moving on to the next possession. There was even a memorable sequence against the Oklahoma City Thunder, where Luguentz Dort knocked him off balance during a drive only for Victor to get right back up without saying a word to the officials. Moments like that have become a huge reason many fans admire his style of play. And when people compare those plays to some of the league's more controversial foul-drawing moments, it's easy to understand why opinions are shifting. The tension reached another level back in February when the San Antonio Spurs met the Los Angeles Lakers. Victor didn't just have a strong game. He completely took over, exploding for 40 points and 15 rebounds in only 26 minutes. He was knocking down mid-range fadeaways over LeBron one possession and racing back to protect the rim on the next. For a lot of viewers, it felt like they were watching a symbolic passing of the torch unfold in real time. But listen to this, that wasn't even the moment people talked about most. Yeah, it gets even colder. During the 2026 All-Star Media Day, a reporter asked Victor whether he expected to get emotional when LeBron eventually retired. Victor didn't laugh. He didn't hesitate, he simply answered no and immediately moved to the next question. That response told everyone exactly where his focus is. He may get emotional about basketball itself, but he's not interested in turning another player's farewell into his own personal moment. Wemby is making one thing crystal clear. He's not interested in joining a farewell celebration for LeBron. He's chasing the top spot, and he wants to earn it the old-fashioned way by taking it on the court. But if you think attitude and mentality are the only differences between these two, wait until you see the numbers Victor is putting up. He's not just outperforming LeBron in certain stretches. He's producing stat lines that are drawing comparisons to legends like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Wilt Chamberlain. And that's making parts of the modern GOAT debate a lot more complicated than people expected. While LeBron spent much of the season explaining why today's game is more demanding than previous eras, Wemby quietly worked his way into one of basketball's most exclusive statistical groups. I'm talking about the 35-15-5 playoff club, 35 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 blocks in a single postseason game. Before Victor, the only names associated with that achievement were Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kareem. That's it, that's the entire list. And Victor didn't just squeeze his name onto it. He accomplished it while posting an elite defensive rating around 104, a mark that instantly grabbed the attention of basketball analysts. The toughest part for LeBron's supporters is the way Victor is reaching these milestones. LeBron's argument centers on the idea that modern spacing has made basketball more complicated, but Wemby is out there hunting efficient shots with the patience and discipline of an old-school superstar. During his 39-point performance against the Minnesota Timberwolves this May, he shot an incredible 72.2% from the field. He isn't chasing empty statistics or forcing highlight plays. He's operating with a level of efficiency that challenges many assumptions about how stars are supposed to score in today's NBA. One of the biggest surprises is his mastery of the mid-range game, where he reportedly connected on 51% of his attempts. While much of the league is obsessed with generating corner threes, Wemby is calmly dissecting defenses possession after possession. He combines that scoring touch with the court vision of players like Magic Johnson, averaging close to 4 assists per game while reducing turnovers. He's basically a classic basketball player built inside a futuristic frame, and that combination is forcing people to rethink a lot of modern basketball assumptions. And let's talk about durability for a second, because this is where the conversation becomes even more interesting. LeBron has often pointed to the speed, athleticism, and physical demands of the modern game when discussing injuries and the growing emphasis on load management.
Michael and Oscar. I got Kobe 6 and LeBron 7.
But listen to this. Victor is currently projected to finish the 2026 season having played more than 71 games. Think about that for a second. A 74 phenomenon built unlike almost anyone in basketball history is showing remarkable durability. While many smaller stars continue to battle availability concerns, it immediately brings to mind Ironmen like AC Green, who famously appeared in 1,192 consecutive games, long before today's advanced recovery technology became standard. Victor's philosophy seems pretty straightforward. If you're healthy enough to compete, you get on the court and play. He reportedly fought through a twisted ankle during this year's playoffs without turning it into a public storyline or making a spectacle of the injury. He simply laced up his shoes and kept producing at a high level. Meanwhile, critics often point out that after major losses, discussions surrounding LeBron frequently shift toward injuries, physical limitations, or recovery concerns. Whether fair or unfair, those conversations have become a recurring part of the narrative around him. But Victor stays quiet and keeps showing up, and that difference in approach is a huge reason why the GOAT debate has suddenly become much more interesting. Because when one of the brightest young stars in basketball openly praises older generations and emphasizes toughness, people naturally start comparing those views to LeBron's comments. If the future face of the league believes previous eras deserve more respect, it inevitably changes how fans view the argument. Even some basketball legends appear to be re-evaluating their own rankings. In a move that generated major headlines earlier this year, Charles Barkley updated his all-time list and placed LeBron at number 7.
Because the game is different. Like, I want people to understand, and our fans to understand, that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2000s.
I got Wilt Kareem. Bill. Continuing the unique rewrite asterisk. But if you really want to see why so many fans believe the balance of power is shifting, you have to look at that rough April 2026 performance against the Houston Rockets. In a game the Los Angeles Lakers desperately needed, LeBron finished with just 10 points on 2 shooting while committing 8 turnovers, and critics immediately pounced on the performance. That sparked an uncomfortable question across social media. If today's game is supposedly easier to dominate because of spacing and offensive freedom, why did the player many call the GOAT struggle so badly? Meanwhile, supporters of older generations pointed to examples like Michael Jordan scoring over 40 points at age 40 without many of the offensive advantages modern stars enjoy. Oh, and it didn't help that LeBron's defensive metrics this season became another major talking point among fans and analysts. But as messy as the on-court debate became, hold up, the off-court drama was about to get even louder. Because critics claim LeBron's camp has become increasingly focused on preserving relevance, fueling speculation about record chasing and stat padding. You won't believe this. One of the loudest voices pushing that theory was sports commentator Rick Butcher. Back in March, Butcher delivered a viral segment suggesting that LeBron's decision to continue playing is partly tied to extending his hold on as many NBA records as possible. And whether you agree or disagree, the examples critics point to have generated plenty of debate. One frequently cited game came against the Washington Wizards when the Lakers held a massive lead late in a blowout. Instead of heading to the bench like many veteran stars might have done, LeBron remained in the game long enough to complete a triple-double. For critics, it became one of the most obvious examples of stat chasing all season, and it left many wondering whether personal milestones are becoming a bigger focus as team success becomes harder to achieve. So the conversation quickly shifted from winning basketball games to accumulating historic numbers. But here, where the speculation takes an even more controversial turn. Some commentators have suggested that LeBron's insistence on portraying today's NBA as the toughest era ever played could also benefit perceptions surrounding Bronny James. Think about it, if people accept that the modern league is more talented, more demanding, and more complicated than any era before it, then Bronny's struggles can be framed as the result of an incredibly difficult environment rather than questions about his development. To critics, that becomes the ultimate public relations safety net. And when you compare that narrative with Victor's rise, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, you have Wembanyama, the son of athletes who built his reputation through discipline, preparation, and relentless work. On the other side, critics see LeBron trying to influence the conversation around the league while simultaneously helping shape the path for his son. But fans are becoming increasingly skeptical, and many believe controlling the narrative is harder than ever in today's media landscape. And if you think Victor's story is only beginning, you're probably right. The bigger question now is whether LeBron's legacy can withstand the growing wave of comparisons that Victor's rise continues to create. So, what do you think? Is Wembanyama becoming the new standard for greatness, or is this criticism of LeBron being blown way out of proportion? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you subscribe because trust me, this story is far from over.